So we're pretty much there with our home lab and home networking series now. We've got one more video coming next week where we'll actually configure our router properly. We've got a super cool product incoming, so stay tuned. You do not want to miss that. But now we're going to be focusing on DHCP, and I kind of promised that in last week's video where I was going to use Pi-hole for DHCP, but there's so many things that have changed. And then I thought, you know what, we can actually utilize the quality of Windows Server and actually go ahead and get DHCP configured and have it completely separate with some amazing features. Now we'll go through setting up Windows Server 2025 and show you some of the quirks. It is pretty much like installing Windows. There's just one thing we need to keep in mind. Then we're actually going to go ahead and configure it. So we're going to set a static IP address. We're going to name it correctly, and we're going to do kind of all the basic configuration. And then we're going to go ahead and install the actual DHCP server, and then we're going to remove it off our router because you can only have one DHCP server. Now, if you're wondering what the hell's a DHCP server, I'm fully with you because I was there myself, but a DHCP server at their very highest level, very, very basic, is if a device is looking to connect to the network, somebody has to give out an IP address, and this is what the DHCP server does. When a device is either trying to connect over Wi-Fi or over Ethernet, it looks at the scope that's available, the IP addresses that are available, and then it goes ahead and hands out an IP address. It's basically that simple. It then takes that MAC address of that device and it puts it into a table, and then it associates an IP address with it. And every so often, say every 12 hours, 7 days, depending on how your DHCP is configured, it then renews that IP address. So it could be that your IP address keeps changing. Now that is not good for devices that need to be on a static IP address, such as your DNS server, and this is why we have reserved it. But obviously with setting up Windows Server 2025 DHCP, we are going to be reserving the IP addresses for my Pi-hole servers, as well as my Proxmox instance, as well as my router, to make sure they remain permanent. But anyway, I've done enough waffling. Let's get started. So let's go ahead and install Windows Server 25 on our Proxmox server here. Now you're obviously going to have to download Windows Server 25. Now if you're installing this on Proxmox, go ahead and watch my previous video where we go over installing Windows 11, because you will need something called VirtIO drivers. They're really easy to get, but it's just something you have to keep in mind if installing it on Proxmox, which is what I'm going to be doing. I will be using the VirtIO drivers. Now, we're also going to be activating Windows Server 2025 with the help of this video sponsor. So in Proxmox, you want to create the virtual machine. Obviously, if you're doing this on a normal Windows PC or on a normal server and you're installing this on bare metal, you just create the USB stick with Rufus. But here I've just named it Windows Server 25 demo because I've already got an instance running. Here it's going to ask us for the ISO image. Now I've already uploaded Windows Server 25 in my case. Under guest OS, I'm going to select Windows, and then I'm going to tick the box where it says add additional VirtIO drivers. I select local, and then here I have the VirtIO drivers ISO. Now under EFI storage, I just choose my internal one. I call it Chunky. Now under the SCSI driver, this is where you want to select VirtIO SCSI, because then it just makes it a lot easier to install the virtual driver for the hard drive. Here we're going to keep it on SCSI. Now under disk size, you honestly do not need a large disk. Now here under cores, obviously give it as many as you need, but honestly again, because this is just going to be a dumb DHCP server, 2 cores should be enough. And then here on the RAM, 4 gig again is enough. On the internet, I'm just going to leave it on the VirtIO para virtualized. That's fine for me. And I'm going to tick start after created. Now the Windows installer is honestly super simple. You should breeze through this. It's really not that difficult to go through. If you've ever installed Windows, you'll know exactly what Windows Server looks like. The installation, there's just one thing that we need to pick essentially when we're coming to install Windows Server. So obviously select your language and your currency, your location, and all this sort of stuff. Now this is the bit that I was talking about. And here where it says Windows Server Setup, here you don't want to pick the wrong option. Now for us, we're going to select Windows Server 25 Standard Evaluation Desktop Experience, because otherwise you're just going to have a terminal-based Windows server. Now, if you're installing this on a virtual machine like I am, you will see here that it says hardware not showing up, you need to load a driver. And this is where we're going to use those VirtIO drivers. So in order to load the driver, and I've just loaded it here because I wanted to make sure it's actually the correct location, you're going to click on Browse, and then you'll see your VirtIO Win 11. You're going to click on that. Then you're going to click on the arrow where it says AMD 64, and then you're going to select 2K25. That's Windows Server 25. You're going to click OK, and it will find the SCSI driver here. And then we're going to click install, and it will now show us the drive. There we go. There's our 64 gig file. And then we're just going to go through and set up Windows. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and do this now because I've already got a Windows Server version running. So if you've done everything correctly and installed Windows Server, this is the screen you should be presented with. Now, if you are running this inside of a VM, I highly recommend you install the VirtIO drivers, where you click on the VirtIO CD, then you scroll down and install both VirtIO Win GT and vert.io win guest utils. It'll just make your experience a lot better, and it talks back nicer to Proxmox or any other hypervisor that you're using. This big scary screen here is one we're going to tackle shortly, but the main thing is we need to make a couple of changes in the settings here in order for this to just work a lot better. Now, if you're like me, I'm going to be remoting into this Windows server here. I'm not going to be actually having it physically connected to a display. I'm just going to be using the Windows app on my Mac, or obviously remote desktop if you are using another Windows PC. So the first thing I like to do is I like to enable remote desktop settings. So you're going to go into remote desktop settings. You're going to tick this on here. You're going to leave it on port 3389, which is kind of the standard port. And that's basically what we're going to do here, because we obviously want to enable the ability to remote in. And the next thing we're going to do, other than Windows updates, which we're going to get to later because they're not that important at this moment in time, we're going to rename this PC, give it a descriptive name. We want it to be something where it actually makes sense. So you don't just want to call win-whatever this is. You want to call it win-srv, for example, 01-DHCP or something like that, just so you know what this is. So we're going to click next here. We've just changed the name. Now it's asking us to restart it. We do not need to restart it. We're going to restart it kind of as a package once we've done all the changes and configuration that we need. So next thing is we're going to click on network and internet. And here is kind of where we want to set a few things up. Let me just expand this a little bit. So we can see network and Ethernet here. It's public network. That's fine for the time being. Now where it says IP assignment, at the moment it is set to automatic, but we need to change that. So we're going to click on edit. Then we're going to click on manual, and here we're going to tick IPv4. Now here, give it an IP address that makes sense for you. 10.0.40.3 is my perfect IP address because my default gateway is 10.0.40.1, and I'm going to be using 10.0.40.3 for this. My DNS servers are .4.5. The subnet mask is 255.255.255.0 for me, but obviously configure it as per your needs. Most of you will be fine with 255.255.255.0. The default gateway, this is your router's IP address. You need to know this. This might be 10.0.40.1 in my case. For you, it might be 192.168.1.1 or 1.254. And then preferred DNS. Now I'm going to set as the DNS server the default gateway because that handles all my DNS requests. So I'm going to do this 10.0.40.1 like so. Now I also like to set an alternate DNS just in case my main DNS goes off. I can always remote in. I can always continue using this, get on the internet and do what I need to do. So this is why I set 1.1.1 here. And then we're going to click save. So now that we've changed the IP address and named it correctly, it's time to restart the server. So this is exactly what I'm going to do. It's going to ask you why you're restarting. I'm just going to put other plans, press continue, and I'm just going to go ahead and restart. Now, one thing you might have noticed is Windows Server 25 is currently not activated. And this is where today's sponsor, keysfan.com, comes in. They are the place for CD keys, and they offer massive discount, and they even have CD keys for Windows Server 25. I'll have an exclusive link for you guys in the pinned comment down below as well as in the description, but let me show you some of the discounts that they are offering. Now they're giving you up to 62% of Microsoft Office using code BLT62. And you can see all the amazing offers that they have. Office 21 Professional Plus for £26 for the year. You can even have it for 5 PCs. So if you need to get it for your friends and family, by all means, this is the way to do it. Now they're also offering you 50% off using code BLT for all Windows editions. And I'm actually about to purchase the Windows Server standard key. So we can see the standard price here is £53.49. If I proceed to checkout and enter my code here, BLT50, and apply the discount, it has half the price to £26 for Windows Server 2025. They are genuine keys. They are real. You can use them, no problem. Now you can pay via credit card or debit card as well as PayPal, and I've chosen the PayPal option here. And there we go. It says, thank you for your purchase. Just checked out using my PayPal account here. And the CD key should be coming any second now. And if we take a look, this is the CD key that was sent to us. Obviously I've blurred it, but just going to show you the last bit here, which is RGHBB. And if we take a look on our Windows Server, it now says Windows Server 2025 standard. The activation state is active, and the little icon in the bottom right hand corner has gone. And you can see the product key as well matches that one, which is RGHBB. And as I said, and the links will be down in the description, you get your 50% off on all the Windows keys and 62% off on all Office products. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to click on Manage here, and then we're going to click on Add Roles and Features. So this will bring us to this window which says role-based or feature-based installation. We're going to use role-based or feature-based installation. We're going to click Next. Here it's going to give us the server that we have, and we can see the name, and this is why it's important. It's just easier to kind of have that configured. IP address is also static, which is perfect. Here we're going to click Next. Now, this is where you can kind of add all the extra features onto your Windows server. Now, we're not going to concern ourselves too much with anything, but you can, for example, install Hyper-V. You can also have your Windows server to be a DNS. Now, because I'm running, as I said, Pi-hole, I don't really need it, but you can do that. But I'm going to click on DHCP. I'm going to tick the box. It's going to say, do you want to add those features? I'm going to click yes. Here, I'm going to leave everything as is. I'm going to click next and next again. And then I'm going to click install, and it will go ahead and install DHCP server tools on our Windows server. Now, depending on obviously the speed of your machine, this might take a few minutes. Well, that took longer than expected, but here we are, that DHCP has now successfully installed the Windows DHCP server tools. So we're going to click close now, and on the left-hand side, we can see we have the option for DHCP now, which means we have correctly installed it. But we can see now at the top, there's a little flag, and it gives us a kind of a warning triangle. And it says configuration required for DHCP at Windows Server DHCP, because that's what I've called it. Now we're going to go ahead and configure DHCP now, but we're also going to have to turn it off on our router or wherever DHCP is running in order for this obviously to take effect, because otherwise you're going to have two DHCP servers with conflicting IP addresses being sent out, and it could be that one of the devices gets a duplicate basically and it will stop working. So you have to turn one off and turn the other one on. So we're going to click commit, and we're going to click close here. So in order to now configure DHCP, we need to click on tools and then DHCP. And we're going to see this very old looking screen here. I've just adjusted the sizing here, but basically we are now ready to configure our scope. So if we take a look here, we have IPv4 and IPv6. We're interested in IPv4 and configuring just IPv4 for the time being. So we're going to right click, then we're going to click on new scope. We're going to click next. Now here, give it a name, but I'm just going to call it main DHCP scope like so. I'm going to click next. Now here is where you want the start of your IP address to be. Now for me, it's 10.0.40.1, and then the end address is 10.0.40.254, like so. Then we're going to type in 24 on the length here, which gives us the subnet mask. Then we're going to click next. Now here is where you can set exclusions. So on most DHCP servers, you set where you want the boundary to be. So which kind of section you want to be given out. Here you tell it which you don't want to be given out. So it's kind of the opposite. So I'm going to do 10.0.40.1 to 10.0.40.99, like so. So this is the first set of excluded IP addresses. And then I want it to do a second set, which is from 201 to 10.0.40.254, like so. I'm going to click add. So essentially the scope is 100 to 200, and I have excluded 1.299 and 201 to 254. Then I'm going to click next. Now here it's going to ask me how long the lease time is. So how long does the device keep that IP address before it requests a new one? Now it's saying here 8 days. I'm going to set it to 1 day. I'm going to click next. And then it's going to say, do I want to configure these options now or not? I'm going to say, no, I don't want to configure these options. I want to configure them later. I'm going to click next. I'm going to click finish. So you can see, hopefully, there's a little red kind of down arrow, which means the scope is currently not in use. But there are a couple more changes that we need to make. So where it says scope options here, we're going to right click and we're going to click configure options. And here you want to tick where it says router, and you want to give it 10.0.40.1. This is where your router lives, your default gateway. So when a device requests an IP address, it needs to know the default gateway, and it needs to obviously know its IP address that it's been given, as well as knowing where the DNS server is. And this is what we're going to set up now. So I'm going to tick the box for router here. And then under .6, it's going to ask for the DNS server. And I'm going to do that as well. I'm going to do 10.0.40.4. I'm going to add that. And it's now validating whether 10.0.40.4 is actually a real DNS server. And then I'm going to do 10.0.40.5. And I'm going to tick add DNS server. Again, it's going to check on the system whether 10.0.40.4 and 10.0.40.5 exist. And these are the two changes I'm going to make. I'm going to click apply, and we have now got a router here, and then we've also got our DNS servers configured. So now when a device gets an IP address, if you get a brand new phone or you bring a laptop home or whatever, it's going to request an IP address, and it's going to go, here's your IP address, here's your router's IP address, so you know how to get on the internet. And then you also need to know the DNS server. In my case, as I said, it's 10.0.42.4 and .5, which we set up in the previous video. Before we go any further and we set up reservations, because I want to show you this, we need to now turn off DHCP on our router. So let's go ahead and jump to that. So I've gone onto my router now, and I've clicked on network and LAN, and we can see the router's IP address here. We can also see the net mask here, and then we can see our DHCP server. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tick this off, and I'm going to click apply like so. And this will go ahead and turn off my DHCP server. So essentially, I don't have anything now that's doing DHCP. So if I had a device join my network at this moment in time, it will not actually be able to get an IP address. So I've now gone back to my Windows server here. And here where it says scope, I'm going to right click it. I'm going to click activate. So this now will be in charge of giving out DHCP addresses. Now I'm going to go ahead and request a new IP address on my Mac here. So we can see here my Mac is currently on 10.0.40.100. We've got subnet mask, we've got router, and we've got DNS server. I'm going to click on details here. I'm going to click on TCP IP, and I'm going to click renew. And if we now go back to my Windows server here, we can see the IP address for my Mac Mini has been handed out literally 5 seconds ago, and it has given it 10.0.40.100. So nothing's really changed. So in order to reserve that IP address and make sure that stays permanent, I can either right click on the actual device where it says client IP and add as reservation. We can see we get a confirmation saying lease converted successfully to reservation. If I click on reservations now, we can see that my Mac has indeed now been reserved and is set in reservations here. And I can see that it's been given a router of 10.0.40.1 and the DNS service 10.0.40.4 and obviously 10.0.40.5. And then now I'm just running a speed test here just to make sure that I can actually get on the internet. And obviously we can see we're getting a gigabit speed, and I get gigabit both ways. Now, obviously, depending on your setup of your previous DHCP server, this might take a second before your devices start appearing here because they currently have an IP address. They have, say, my printer's on 201, my printer's always on 201. It's not really requesting an IP address at this moment in time. It will get to a point where it will go, actually, hold on, I need a new IP address, and only then will it appear here. You can force this by all means, but for the time being, just keep an eye on here and obviously make sure that your devices get the correct IP address reserved. Now, the final thing we're going to do to complete this whole setup is we're going to now install Tailscale and join this Tailscale server to our network to make sure it is within our Tailscale network so we can remote in from essentially anywhere in the world, because if we need to jump on and troubleshoot and all this sort of stuff, this is a way to do this. So you're going to go ahead and set up a Tailscale account. If you don't know how to do that, go and watch my previous videos. But for now, we can just download the app for our system. In our case, it's obviously Windows. I've already gone ahead and downloaded it, and I don't know why I clicked on shopping here. And I'm just going to go through and install it step by step by step. So Tailscale is now installed. It's going to now ask us to sign into our network. And there we go. It's now asking me, do I want to connect the Win-SRv01 DHCP to the Telnet? I'm going to click connect, and I now need to approve it because that's how I've got my settings set. And if I click on machines now, we can see that our Windows Server 01 DHCP is now in our Tailscale network. It's running Windows Server 2025, and we can essentially remote in using the Tailscale IP address using something called Rustdesk, or as obviously using the Windows app as well. We can now remote into this machine direct. And we have now essentially got our whole system in Tailscale. It is protected by a VPN. We can always remote in. We can make changes. We've offloaded the router to be doing DHCP, ad blocking, all this sort of stuff. It's now basically just doing nothing. It's just doing network address translation. It's the very kind of fundamentals that it needs to do. And we've now got a robust DHCP server as well as obviously ad blocking set up, because that's another thing that obviously we need. We need to make sure our internet is filtered. We don't, click on any phishing links or anything like that. But as I said, to tie this whole thing together next week, stay tuned, because we are going to be going through a complete router setup, because I've got a super cool device coming up. A company has reached out. They wanted to send me a device for me to take a look at. And immediately when I saw it, I was like, this is the perfect perfect device to create a super powerful router that can just live on your system. It's silent, it's got 10 gigabit ports, it's got 2.5 gigabit ports. Honestly, I'm so excited. And yeah, I can't wait for you to see this. So make sure you stay tuned, make sure you subscribe and like this video as well. And don't forget to check out the sponsor KeysFan. I've got all the links down in the description below. Get your CD keys for Windows, Windows Server, Office, and so on down below. And click obviously through the link. I get a little kickback as well. And obviously you get a discount. So again, thank you very much for watching. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one.